You hear anything yet, Sherry?
Good morning, everyone. Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2026 Data Validation Refresher course. My name is Tiffany Daniels, and I'm one of the presenters, along with Anya Iwezu. We'd like to thank you for joining us, and we hope this will be informative. At the end, we will take questions that can be submitted via the chat or live. Today, we'll provide an overview of the key components of data validation. This includes TIGO 23-19 Change 3, Alabama Department of Workforce Data Validation Policy, PERL reporting timeline, and submitting data validation using the electronic version. TIGO number 23-19 Change 3 is the most recent directive from USDOL data validation. It was issued December 1st, 2025, and is active and continuing. The link to access the document is included in the slide, and everyone will receive a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. The purpose of the TIGO is to provide clarification of program instructions. Attachment 1, provide program-specific data validation instructions. And attachment 2 lists source documents for each element. The initial version of TIGO 23-19 provides information and guidelines for grant recipients. This is to assist in developing procedures that ensure the data submitted for performance reporting are valid and reliable. Our state data validation policy re-emphasizes the necessity of accurate, valid, reliable data and establish the routine requirements of quarterly data validation and annual training staff. You can find this document under Staff Online Resources in Alabama Works. This is the PERL reporting timeline for this year's data validation. The PERL reports are due for submission to USDOL 45 days after the end of this quarter. After they are accepted, Anya will send a notification to staff when the data validation files are generated.
Thank you, Tiffany. I got a message that some of the staff can't see the screen. Can somebody unmute and say whether or not you can see the screen now?
I see it, Anya.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I am going to share my screen so we can go over the electronic submission version for data validation and give you an example as well. Let's see. Share screen. All right. So this is somebody I already had pulled up. Okay. Okay, so to do data validation, you will need two internet browsers, um, one for viewing the report and one for viewing the client's record. Um, I'm going to show you how to pull up the data validation report. Okay, so we're going to go to reports, federal reports, WIOA performance, Rural Reporting Assistant, rural data sampling. Okay. I'm going to show you Q1 2025, what it looks like, what the sampling will look like. Let's see, I'm just going to do Q1 reporting period. I'm going to select Q1. So when we send the email that the files are ready and you view the files, you're going to see 4 file names. And for funding stream, you see that there are 2 Wagner-Pizer. MSFW has recently been added to data validation, and the foreign labor unit will be conducting that data validation. So be sure to look at the request title to make sure you are selecting the correct file. So the 2 for Wagner-Pizer, there's 1 regular Wagner-Pizer and 1 MSFW. And we still have a few records in Wagner-Pizer that need to be completed, and I'll show you how you can view outstanding records for any data validation. The example that we're going to use is for funding stream Wagner-Pizer, and I did a test in Q2 2025. I'm going to filter. Okay, show details. And this provides information about the file. And if it's easier, you can download the data element validation workbook. I previously downloaded one, and this is what it looks like. It'll just, once you set the parameters, you can download that, work from the sheet, put your answers in the sheet, but you will need to put it in Alabama Works. This is just if you don't want to use 2 screens. You can download the workbook to work from. Okay, but for this example, I'm going to use complete data element validation. And I'm going to select Central Alabama Works for my workforce area, the office, Montgomery Career Center, prepare forms. Okay, so this tells you about the data sample. All records in this particular sample for the Montgomery Career Center there are 16 records. There are none completed at this time. Partially completed, there's 1. And there are 15 outstanding records that need to be validated. So if you want to look for your area, you can go back to form selection, take out office, leave that as non-selected, do prepare forms, and for the entire workforce area, there's 37 records, 36 outstanding, 1 partially completed. Okay. I'm going to go back and change that to Montgomery. So to access this record, I'm going to change my completion stage to partially completed. And there are 2 links, one for the unique individual identifier, which the last numbers here are the state ID for this client, and validate record. Clicking this link, the identifier will take you to the client's record. So we try not to do that unless we just need to go to the record, because you will have to go right back into the report. But I'm going to click validate record. And this has been previously completed. And I just want to show you I just want to show you the example of how a completed data validation form or worksheet looks like. So we start with 200, the element name, 200 date of birth. And let's just go over the columns. We have, matter of fact, let's just start up here. Okay, so in the form, you will see again the state ID, the unique individual identifier, which has the zeros, and then the state ID is here, starting at the number portion. Then you have the program entry and exit date, which is very important to make sure that you're working in the correct application. And the funding stream, make sure you're working in the correct program. And then it shows you the workforce area and the office. So the columns, you have your data element name and number in one column. The reported value, we are working from this column. If you see a reported value in this column, you must choose an audit outcome of pass or fail. There are other options, but for our validation, we only use pass or fail. And you must select one of the source documents, one of the acceptable source documents for each element, and they vary. And then there's the comment field. If for some reason there's a fail, you will enter a comment on why, just a brief comment on why there's a fail. If you use some of the source documents allow other not listed in Teagle, then enter a comment on how you, just a brief comment on how you validated the information. So in the preceding elements, a lot of these are self-attestation, and the customer information form is an acceptable self-attestation form. And self-attestation is used only when there's no other documentation available. So for date of birth, there's all of these documents that you can use to validate. But many times the easiest way to validate for a client is self-attestation. So for this client, I have already looked her up. And then I go to documents. And the customer information form happens to be uploaded the same day as the program entry and exit date. So I did use this one. I already downloaded that particular form, but I wanted to block out some of the information since it's PII. So the date of birth. And with this form, the client must have signed the form. So that's why it's very important to make sure when a client is, or when you're reviewing these, that the information is completed, each question answered, and that it is signed by the client, which is signed and dated by the client. So many of the answers on data validation, you see self-attestation, I obtained from that form. For 401 UC eligible status, claimant referred by RSCA, I did use the letter. There's also services entered in the account, so I was able to pass on that. Let's look at, okay, so you see here on some of these questions where self-attestation was not listed, I used other and entered a comment, self-attestation. I did have a fail. I was not able to I wasn't able to match the date of actual dislocation. So I marked fail, used the source document I could verify a date with, and marked fail because the information did not match. Okay. Date of program entry, date of program exit. Let me show you this in the client's file. And I will also show you other 923 other reasons for exit. Okay, so we see that the participation date is September 10th, 2025, and the exit date is the same. And that is what is on the worksheet. So that will pass using electronic records. The exit, other reasons for exit, the exit reason is soft exit, so that would be a pass. Let's look at that again. Okay, so we match the program entry and exit date, electronic records, 923. 00 is no. So I would encourage everyone to read or go through the Teagle to get familiar with it, because that's where the instructions are for each of the elements. And so I'm going to pull that up, 923, as an example. See, Control F, 923. Okay, so it says record. Let's see, let me make that a little bigger. Record 00 if the participant meets none of the above conditions. And so there are 7 other reasons for exit. 1, the person has become incarcerated. 2, medical treatment. 3, the participant died. 4, member of the National Guard. 5, in the foster care system. 6, someone who was determined eligible and then later determined not eligible. And 7, a criminal offender. So if none of these are listed, then 00 is recorded. So soft exit will pass in that situation. Again, we're working from the reported value column. If there is a reported value, we need to have an audit outcome of pass or fail. Okay, so I have rapid response in red, not validated. I have a question about that. So um, if you have a question and you'd like to, you know, get assistance on that, what we ask is that you just copy from here the unique individual identifier on down to funding stream and put that in the email. Then you can just, change that or leave it as non-selected, whatever the default is. Just leave it as your question and answer the ones that you can answer. And just move on and then click save, and it will save in the partially completed so that you can come back to it at a later date and add the answer. So rapid response is no. I originally put pass, but I think I'm going to leave it as not validated. Okay, let's go down to element 1001. And this is where I will be using the desk guide that we created. It's a tool to help with elements 907, 1001 that asks for services that it's not really clear on which services it may be. So we match those codes in admin for each of these elements all the way through 1300. So for 1001, and we were able to pass all of these, the services were there. Well, not 1007, but 1001, we will be looking for any of these services in the client's record with the date that's listed. So let's go to see a 102 service. So we were able to pass that particular element on the 102 service. And the 102 service is there. And that's how all of these will work. Okay. Wages, many of the wages were not listed. So when you see information not yet available, mark pass and use one of the UI wage data match documents or cross match with state and out-of-state UI quarterly wage record. When you see the nines, it means the same thing, information not available, not yet available. So again, you would just mark pass and select UI wage records. Retention with same employer. This is where we use the UI data as well. And the primary way that you're going to search for wages is to go to activities. Wage information for program participant. And then I'm going to change this to wages by industry. And that pulls up the next code at the end. Again, when you're looking at wages, you need to match the program with the participation and exit date. So I'm looking for September 10th, 2025, Wagner Pizer here. And currently available is first through third quarter prior to registration. And that happens to be all listed in the worksheet. And these do match. So I was able to pass. So I'm going to click save. And again, because I had a question on the rapid response, I will leave it partially completed so that I can come back to it. Again, the information that you would need to include in your email is located at the top. You could simply just, copy and paste. Copy that, put in the email, and state the element and the reported value that you have and what you found to be different. If you see that the data doesn't match, just, mark fail and put a comment. Once I change this to pass, and let's just say I'm gonna put self-attestation here, and I do save, then the record is now completed, and there are 15 outstanding records that need to be completed. So that's all I have on the electronic version. I'm going to pass this right back to you, Tiffany. Let's see.
All right, so we just have a few key reminders that we want to share with you guys. You, the staff, are the validators. Anya and I are here for guidance. Staff make the decisions to mark, pass, or fail based on the findings. If any of the information cannot be validated by any of the sources listed, the element should be marked fail. Anytime an item is marked fail, list the reason, explanation in the comments section. Ask for assistance if wages are not listed in Alabama Works. There may be out-of-state wages that we can verify. Use data validation as your focal point to improve case management, keeping good records, entering the case notes, uploading documents, just to name a few. Those things will make your process of validating the records a smoother process. All right, so that concludes the data validation refresher course. I don't see any questions in the chat at this time. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask live? All right, Tyler has a question and he's asking, did you say the CIF is the last resort for verifying self-attestation?
Hi, Tyler. CIF is used as self-attestation, and per USDOL, self-attestation should be a last resort. If there are other, I guess, higher level documents that you can use for a particular element. So USDOL would prefer self-attestation to be, limited, but they can't really put that rule on there. They want you to, you can use it, but it's, if you don't have anything else, but they prefer for the data collection to be more thorough. I hope that answers your question.
All right, so it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Okay, here come one from Derek Turner. I missed the beginning with the birthday validation. Derek, it is recorded, so if you want to go back and watch it after we end it and Anya sends out the link, you can do that, unless Anya, you want to answer that question.
Yes, right, okay, he says, okay, will
Okay.
do.
Should we start getting everyone's ID? Um, if they have it, yes, that will be a good document to upload into the system to fall back on if we have any questions about date of birth, or if date of birth is written wrong on the CIF or is entered incorrectly somewhere. We can oh, is the ID, does the ID have date of birth on it still?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, you should. We typically do that for a WIA, otherwise we take their word for it. Okay. All right. Amanda's asking if using the CIF, does the date on it have to match the enrollment date?
There are some cases, and I know especially when AWSP was going on, I don't know if it's still going on, where the date, sometimes they would mail it in, or, they would bring it in after they filled it in. So it doesn't necessarily have to match. I believe what we're looking for is a participation date to match when staff actually gave the service. That should match. So sometimes there's a delay in the system, and maybe you had somebody, let's just say yesterday, but you can't enter them until today, or maybe you can't enter them until tomorrow. Well, you need to use the date that you actually provided the service, especially if you're going to say, I provided service 22nd, but I wasn't able to enter them until the 23rd, or the 24th. It needs to be the 22nd. And usually staff just, request a back date. But I was going to say, um, make sure you get your guidance from your area manager or from program services, because they will be able to tell you better.
All right, Tyler has a question, element 1007. Could you help explain this one? Help explain this one, what would count as reportable individual contact?
Okay, so for that one you would use the desk guide that we created. If everybody does not already have it, after this training, everybody will have it. And that is basically, desk is what I call the data element service code guide, because they're starting from data element 907 up into 1300. This guide, it would be useful. So 1007, we see that the service codes are 110, 119, 120, and YB1. Now, uh, this guide can change, and if there are any changes, we'll make sure that, we update you on that.
All right, Tyler has a question. If the CIF isn't signed, dated by the client, we shouldn't use it for data validation.
You can't use it for data validation because self-attestation, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, if you're out there, I believe the self-attestation has to be signed.
That's right, Anya. Yeah, and the CIF should be signed and dated because the staff should make sure that it's signed and dated prior to registering them or using that for enrollment. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, thank you, Kevin.
All right, we have a question from Deidre. Retention with the same employer. How do we validate if we only see wage numbers?
That if the second and fourth quarter wages, if there are second and fourth quarter wages for the same employer, that is what is accepted. Let's look at the Teagle. I'm going to share my screen. And I believe that was, let's look at this record that we had completed. $16, $18. So retention with same employer in the second quarter and the fourth quarter. It says record 1 if the participant's employer in the second quarter also matches the employer in the fourth quarter. And so 0 if the participant is not employed in the second or fourth quarters after exit, or the employer in the second quarter does not match the employer in the fourth quarter. So the source documentation, one of the first ones is UI wage data match. Then you can also use a post-exit survey from the participant, pay stubs. 9 times out of 10, they're not there. None of this information is there. So 9 times out of 10, what we're going to have is the UI wage data. If it's not there, like Tiffany mentioned, you can email to see if there are other ways for us to look up wages. Other than that, I can only suggest a fail if you're not able to match it. And then we can do further research to see if we can find information on that client.
Sorry, y'all, I had been fine with it. We have one more question from Tyler. He wants to know, can we still use data stations to verify the same employer?
No. All data should be verified using Alabama Works. Everything you get should be used with Alabama Works.
And that has came up before about staff using data station to verify wages. Kevin, are you still here?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you clarify the reasoning why staff can't use data stations for data validation to verify wages or the retention for employment?
Sure. That is two different systems. What we're doing is we're verifying information from Wagner Pizer enrollments. The data station system interfaces with Alabama Works, and when the wage transfer is done in data station to Alabama Works, it's only done one time a quarter, and then that's it. that's all that you see on the wages from Alabama Works. So you may find wages in Alabama Works like 30 days later, and then you go on the data station and you're finding wages that are updated constantly. So those wages, that might not match up. What we're trying to do is validate data in Alabama Works and only Alabama Works, not data station. I hope
Thank you,
that helps.
Kevin. Yeah, they
Yes,
did.
and
Thank you.
Kevin, while we're on that, I guess it's related, but the WIOA co-enrollments, I know we have some questions on why sometimes youth providers are seen in our data validation, and I know you had did the research on that and gotten us clarity about a year ago on that, but I did want to bring it up during the training so that it could be, shared across the board on the youth providers.
Yeah, when Tammy and them started using youth providers instead of using career center staff, then enrollments were created in WIOA, and the agreement was even though they're youth, they would come and do a Wagner Pizer enrollment with career center merit staff um, because Wagner Pizer must be done by merit staff. So they would do a Wagner Pizer enrollment, put in services, then they would go and the youth provider would do most of the instances the WIOA enrollment. So even though that they are done by a youth provider, we're still responsible for the WIOA part. And when Anya sends out the quarterly reviews, sometimes you will see a youth provider on there for your section or for whatever your region. I would encourage everybody, if you get one for your region and the youth providers there, check it. Make sure it's not your career center or it is your career center, who the Wagner Pizer case manager is, because the WIA case manager will be different to verify, because we're going to get credit for employment second, fourth quarter, and wage, um, and possibly even employee retention on that. So yeah, Anya, I would make sure that you guys check when you have a youth provider's name, even though it's not the career center that you're located at. What the reason is the wages and all that is reported into both co-enrollments, and we certainly want to work with WIA and get these people enrolled in Wagner Pizer just in case. Hope that helps.
Yes, thank you, Kevin.
All right, Rebecca said for the retention issue, we can't verify it through Alabama Works unless the client has provided additional information later on, which in my office, this does not generally happen. I can verify it through data station, but I am understanding that we are to put a fail on the data validation report since we can't verify it through Alabama Works and can't use data station to verify retention with the same employer.
So, no, you can't use an outside system for Wagner Pizer data validation. But there are ways to verify an employer, whether the participant had the was employed by the in the second quarter and the fourth quarter. Um, and I'm going to highlight two of the source acceptable documentation. The post-exit survey from the program participant. Of course, you can use paycheck stubs, which is normally not collected in a Wagner Pizer interview. But there's also detailed case notes verified by employer and program staff. So this is what we're allowed to use for Wagner Pizer data validation. Um, like I said, if you look into the wages in the client's account and you're unable to validate, just send an email to Tiffany or me, and we can, you know, assist further. After, you have checked and, you know, looked in the documents to tell whether the client has the retention for second and fourth quarter. Yeah, reach out to us with the information stated, earlier.
All right, so it doesn't look like we have any more questions in the chat. Since we don't, then guys, this concludes the data validation refresher course. And we'll see you guys next year. Have a good one.
Thank you.